Okay, so we've talked a little bit about in Linux basically how to get our way around the file system and where stuff is and where we would expect to find things. Home directories are in home, for example. Temporary files are in slash temp. Boot files in the Linux kernel are in slash boot. They're all that kind of stuff. But there may be times where you're looking for a particular file. And it might be in your home directory. You may have put it in temp. You may have put it somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. There are three commands that we're going to talk about here that are ways that we can find things in Linux. And the first one we're going to talk about is locate, and then find, and then we'll talk about which. So what I want to do is demonstrate each one of these commands for you and sort of tell you how they're different and what we're looking for. So locate is probably the easiest one here to understand. Um, so the way this is going to work here is if I know the name of a file that I'm looking for, but I don't know where it is. What I can do is I can locate, and then the example that your book gives is if it's looking for a configuration file called inittab. So if I say locate a file named inittab, all I have to do is type the locate command, and then I type the name of the file that I'm looking for. Okay, and it gives me a couple things in here, and you can tell that it's giving me the name of this file is the init tab, and then this has something in it, inittab.og, and then inittab.vim here. Well, that's interesting. That's not necessarily what we're looking for, and you can see that when I hit enter, I accidentally hit the a backspace or a forward slash or something here. So this is actually not going to show up there. That was from me, and we know that because when I run it again, it's not there. So this is probably what I'm looking for, and if I want to take a look at it, I can see that, hey, look, here's the file that I was looking for. Great. Okay. It's actually not a configuration file that's being used anymore, but we don't talk about that until much later in the class. Now, one of the things that you probably noticed with this, though, is that this was really fast. Normally, if you're trying to do a find file on your home computer, Windows is going to take a really long time to find something. And how come Linux is so fast? Well, the little secret here is that init or locate the locate command, when we're looking for a init tab here, it doesn't actually go search every point in the file system. What it does is it's going to go ahead and it has a database that it updates probably typically once a day, and it says, I'm going to go out and look at the file system and make sort of this database that tells me where all these files are. So it's not actually searching the file system as it exists now. It's searching the file system as it existed, say 12 hours ago when it actually generated that file. So if I went back into my home directory and I created a new file and I called that something like Garrett file, and then I say, you know what, I don't know where I put that. Well, I really do know because it's right there. But if I wanted to find it using locate, I could type something like locate Garrett file, and it's probably not going to come up with anything at all because I created this file after it indexed the database the last time. So if I want to force Linux to go ahead and update the database again, what I can do is I can type update db. All right. Now, when I type that, it tells me I can't open a temporary file for this. And the reason for this is that update db is actually something that has to be run by the root or administrative user. So if I type sudo update db, it's going to ask me for my password. I'm going to give it my password, and it's going to go ahead and run that. Now that means that if I go ahead and hit up arrow here and tell it to locate this, it should be able to find it. And sure enough, it finds it. Okay, so what I want you to be aware of is there's a couple things here. When we're using locate, locate is likely to be the fastest thing because it doesn't actually search the file system. It's just going through the database that it created. But because of that, the trade-off is that it may not actually be accurate with sort of the latest status of the file system. If you have made a bunch of changes and then you're trying to find the file that you just moved, locate probably is not going to help you. The way you can get around this is by running update db. But one of the things that you got to be aware of is that on larger Linux systems that have a lot of hard drives all over the place, update DB might actually take a long time to run. On this is just a little VM, doesn't have a big hard drive, doesn't have a whole lot of files, so that runs really quickly. All right. That's about really all we need to talk about with locate. Locate's the easiest one to use, and the format of this is you type the word locate and then you type the name that you're looking for, and that's it. That's how it works. The next thing that we can do, the next command we can talk about is find. And find works a little bit different in that it's actually going to go out and search the file system. So uh, if you're actually going out and searching the file system, there's a couple things here that are different. First of all, um, it's not going to be as fast, right? Because it actually is going out and looking through the entire file system. Um, the other thing is that it's going to be it's going to give you an answer that reflects what the file system looks like now. In other words, it's going to be more up to date. The other thing is the format of using this looks a little bit different. If I just type something like find Garrett file, it's not really going to know what that means. And it happens to work right here because I'm in the exact same directory as where Garrett file is. But most of the time this won't work. Probably not going to use find on a file that's in the same directory that I'm currently in, because at that point I probably know where it is, right? So when you're using the find format, there are a whole bunch of different options, and a lot of them are explained on page 158 of the book. Let me step through just a couple of those to give you guys kind of a working definition of what this is looking like. So what I would do, the first thing is obviously, and this is always true for Linux, the first thing is going to be the command. So I'm going to type find, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Linux the directory that I want it to search in. So if I type something like TMP, for example, it's only going to look in the TMP directory. So if you went into TMP to do a CD TMP and then did an ls, it's going to look in there, and then in all the folders or the directories that are in temp, it's going to look in there too. If there are folders in there, it's going to look in there. So this is where it starts in the folder in the file system, but it's only going to look for stuff that's under TMP. Okay. So that's the first thing that you have to give it. If I only want it to search for stuff in my home directory, for example, I could do home gsmith. All right. If I did something like this, and then I said, then there are different things that you can search for. With locate, I'm just searching for the file name, right? But I can actually search for, say, something that is a certain size, or a file that's empty, or a file that's a certain age, or a file that is of a certain type. If I'm looking for just blocked files, or if I'm looking for symbolic links, we'll talk about what that means in a minute. There are options that you can put for all of that using the find command. Now, I'm guessing that most of you are probably going to use are going to be looking for things by the name. It's just the most common way to use find, and it's how most of us think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type tac name, and this tells find that what I'm looking for is going to be specified by the name of the file. And then what I can do here is I'm going to put the name, and it needs to be in quotes. So if I'm looking for yum.log or something like this, then I'm going to go ahead and do that, and it's going to hit enter, and it's going to find everything that's called yum.log that's in home gsmith, right? Now, if I was gonna, I could also do something like this. We've talked about wildcards before. Wildcards work just fine with find. They don't work quite as well with locate. The way locate is set up just doesn't make a lot of sense to use them, but it does with find. If I type find home gsmith tac name star.log, what this is going to do is this is going to find everything in my home directory that ends in .log, no matter what the beginning is. And you can see that here there's more stuff. There are these two yum.log files that I found, and then some stuff that I didn't even know was there. Oh, well, where did that come from? Well, look at the file path. If it's in home gsmith .cache, then that's an invisible file, right? So that's something that I wouldn't normally see. So .cache and .local are both files that I wouldn't necessarily know were there unless I went and found them using the find command. If you can use the find command here to do something like var log name star.log. If I did something like this, you're going to see that there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that it returns, but it also comes back with some stuff that says permission denied. Generally, as a general rule, if you're using find on a Linux system, if you're searching places that you don't have permission to see, you're going to get a bunch of errors that look like this. If you want to, you can always sudo this. So I'm just going to hit the up arrow and type sudo in front of it to run this as an administrative user. And at that point, you can see that at the very least, I don't get any error messages telling me that I don't have permission to do anything. But one of the things that we can see here is that this is everything that's a log file that is in var log. Okay. Let's do something else here. The other thing that I can do is I can search by file type. So if I want to say, you know what, I'm really only interested in finding file directories, what I could do is something like, we're gonna search something that I don't normally have permission to search. So I'm going to do this as sudo as well. Sudo find boot dash or tech type D. And what this tells the find command is that we actually only want to look for things that are directories. This is an example on page 157, and kind of the explanation for what you can use for this sort of thing right here shows up on page 158. So if you want to look for files that are of a certain size, if that are empty, something like that, all those empty files that we created earlier as me, I could find those by typing find home gsmith and then empty. I think this is how it works. Yep, that's how it works. So this just finds everything in here that's an empty file, right? And you can see that here are some of these things that we were messing around with earlier. Okay, so that's about all we need to say about find. Find is really a flexible command that's very powerful. It's worth going through table 4.3 and trying out some of those options there. Now the last thing that I want to talk about is the which command. Now, which is a little bit different, but this has to do with if I type, let's go ahead and say, you know what, I want to run VI or something like that. So if I type VI and then give it yum.log here, I'm suddenly in this this program that's a text editor. Well, where did it find that? How did it know what was there? Well, I think we probably all have a concept that Linux knows to try to find that somewhere, because I can't just type the name of something that I want to be on the system. If I was like, you know, Microsoft PowerPoint yum.log, it's going to come back, well, it's going to, if I misspell log, it's really not going to work. But if I come back to something like this, it's going to tell me, hey, Microsoft PowerPoint is not a command that I found. Well, where is it looking for those commands? Where it's looking for those commands is in something that's called the path. The path here is something it's a variable, so we can actually see it by typing echo path like this. So this is echo $, and then path, all in capital letters. And you can see that it gives us a big long string of stuff here. Well, what does this mean? Well, what this means is that Linux is going to go look for, if I type something like VI or Microsoft PowerPoint, what it's going to go do is it's going to go look inside this file right here. And it's going to, and if it finds it, it's going to launch it. That's what it's going to use. And then if it doesn't find it, though, it's going to go onto this file right here. This colon here is a way of saying this is what separates these two things in the list. So if you want to think about this as being a list, and then this is the thing that says, all right, that thing is over, not time to move on to the next thing. The colon is just a delimiter here. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a colon in that directory. So the next place it's going to look is here. Then the next place it's going to look for is here, except there we go. And then the next place it's going to look is here. The next place, and so on, and it just keeps going until it finds it. So if I type something like which VI, what it's going to tell me, well, first of all, it tells me that there's an alias here. Then it tells me that this is actually where this is located. If I go back and compare this thing to something in here, you're going to notice that you're going to be able to find where this is located somewhere in that path up there, right? And this is going to be true for everything that it finds, because Um, well, there's a couple things at play here, but um, what Linux is going to do is it's going to tell you which place in the path that it's founded. If it doesn't find anything, um, it's going to come back and tell you that there's no PowerPoint in any of these places, right? So this isn't so much going to be does a file exist on the system? If you wanted to know that, you could just type locate VI or find vim or something like that. But what this is going to tell you is when you launch a program from the command line, if it's VI, if it's echo, if it's ls, because all of those are actually programs. Well, for purposes of this discussion, they're all programs. Where is it looking to find that? And it's going to look inside these directories, which is going to tell you which place it finds it. And these are generally prioritized by looking at the things at the front of the list first, and the things in the end here only if it doesn't find it at the beginning. So that is a way to find files in Linux. Locate, remember, is going to only search by the name, and it uses a database to do it, so it's going to be very fast. Which is going to be able to find things based on its sort of looking at the file system now, and which is going to look in the places where it's going to look for executable files, and which are listed in your path variable, and then tell you what it finds and which one it's going to launch based on that information. So that's how we can find files in Linux.